Today, we're going to talk about how it is that we figure out what other people are thinking in the United States. We're going to look at public opinion polling. We're going to take a look at the process. We're going to take a look at some of the problems associated with public opinion polling. And we're going to figure out why this is important at all. So, like we see, first of all, there's our adorable little pollster down there asking questions. And that's the kind of thing that we're going to go through today. What are the steps in the process? What we do with this as political scientists is we figure out, we try to predict election outcomes. We try to figure out what policies are popular and things like that. So today we're going to look at the public opinion polling process so that we can understand how it is we figure out what Americans like. So our unforgettable learning objective today, we are going to describe the process of measuring public opinion. We're going to go through all sorts of steps. We're going to go through all the places where this can go wrong. We want to be able to explain the influence of polling on policy making. So we'll answer the question today, how do we measure the public opinion? Here's a couple of trustworthy old voters who were surprised by a pollster on their way out of the polling place today. So they are filling out what we call an exit poll, and we'll talk about that. And the exit poll is the kind of polling that's used on election night to help us predict who will win an election and which types of voters are determining the outcome. So we're going to talk about the public opinion. We're going to talk about public opinion polling and some of the things that influence polling and all that, and then eventually we'll go through the steps in the process. First, with public opinion, these are the types of terms that sometimes we're asked to define. So just make sure we're all on the same page. When we use the term public affairs, we are just talking about all of the issues that concern the public, right? All of the issues that concern the people, at large out there in the world. Anything can end up being public affairs, right? Any policy issue to any candidate to any controversy of the day. The public opinion is the collective view about the public affairs. So hopefully, we'll find some way to measure the opinion of the group. And that's what we mean when we talk about public opinion. We're talking about the thinking, the policy choices or the policy desires of the majority of people, if we can get to that or something. But we're trying to measure what percentage of the population prefers this policy, prefers this candidate, and other political issues like that. All right, why do we bother measuring the public opinion? Basically, we're trying to get an answer to a political question. There's all sorts of different public opinion polls, which we'll look at, but the most common would be who's going to win the election, or what do we think about this particular policy? And so we're trying to answer a political question with this information. Now, the politicians, the people who are in office or running for office, they want to know what the voters think. They want to know what the voters think about an issue so that they can respond to that issue in a way that makes them popular, right? They want to if they express an idea of theirs and they find out that it's unpopular, they know that that's not something the public wants. The politicians are supposed to do what the public wants, so they need to know what the public thinks about things. The people, regular people, you want to see a public opinion poll because you want to know how your opinion measures up to other people. If we're talking about an election and you have a favorite candidate, but you see polling where that candidate's only getting 2% of the vote, they're not going to win. So you might start to look at other candidates that are a more realistic option. So the public likes to measure their own opinion against other people. If you have a policy stance on a certain issue, maybe you want to know whether or not you're in the majority of the population or if you're in a small minority of the population. And here's the sad truth. For the media, we focus so much on public opinion because it is easy to report. Somebody has done all the hard work for the media here. They polling organizations and universities do the research and publish the results. And then news organizations, all they have to do is read the results to you and start to think about why the results ended up a certain way or what it means for the future. So this is very easy for the media to use because somebody else does the hard work for them. And this is why we see so much public opinion polling in the media. It's cheap and it's easy to produce. Some of this will be pretty obvious here, but we want to think about some factors that influence public opinion. Obviously, those same things about political socialization will, so family, media, school, and all that. But these things have a little more of an impact on public opinion. One would be mass media. like mass media, the like news organizations, newspaper, television, internet sources, things like that. They're giving us information about the government and about policy options and about candidates, and the way they report on things has a tremendous influence on how the public feels, right? The way they present a candidate has tremendous influence on whether or not that candidate will or can be successful. If they like decide to like focus on like a candidate's character flaws, that's a problem. If they decide to focus on things that a candidate does that are great, that will help the candidate and things like that. But the media makes choices about what information to give us, and they're not always doing it because they like have a specific agenda, but they're doing it because they want to make money. So like they choose the things that are like going to attract the most people to their news organization, and the way that they make those choices has a lot of influence on how we feel about these particular issues. Obviously history does a lot of that too, right? Especially like recent history of events like influences how people feel about things. People probably feel like at a time like this, people are probably feeling that government's focus on like health is probably way more important than they would have felt about 4 years ago. Like the history, the like developing events and stuff, that changes what people's priorities are. History of candidates can like change or impact people's attitudes about the candidates and things like that. And this is a little related to the next one, which is the makeup of the government. Like public opinion is usually pretty dependent on what the current situation is. So a lot of times we'll see like opinion polling where like if we're trying to measure like is the economy successful or something like that, people will be willing to say that the economy is successful if the party they like is in power, but given the same stats and the opposite party in power, they would say it's a bad economy. So like we've got to think about who's the president. We got to think about who's running Congress, who's controlling the courts or the local government. Um, is one party controlling all of the branches? Those kinds of things. Right now, since the Democrats control the Congress and the presidency, it's likely that the public will blame the Democrats for a lot of the problems. It's likely that the public will maybe develop attitudes about Democratic priorities on the government and things like that. So those are very important factors too. And then the last one is opinion leaders, and we're going to talk about opinion leaders for a second. Opinion leaders are going to be people, maybe even like organizations like a website or something like that. These people are like widely known and widely trusted. They have a ton of influence over the public opinion. Now, when we're talking about opinion leaders, this is basically like, what we think about influencers online, but these are like influencers for the news and influencers for public affairs. So the most common version of this tends to be like a person who is presenting the news and presents like opinion as well, right? Like they tell you the news and what they think about it. So like they're using their position, their like megaphone or their like elevated voice, their amplified voice from their TV show or podcast or something like that, to try to like inform the public in a way that influences how the public feels about the issue. They would try to influence the public to like they say they want to activate the public. They want to get people engaged in like calling congressmen or organizing to like change a policy or something like that. So here at the bottom, we've got a couple of examples of like prominent opinion leaders at the moment. So on the conservative side, Tucker Carlson would be one of the most prominent opinion leaders. He runs a news show on Fox News every night, and so he gets on there and he talks about the news, but he adds his opinion to the news and he tells you what he thinks about the news and how you should feel about the news. If you've ever, on the liberal side, if you've ever watched John Oliver's show on HBO, it's the same thing. Like he's telling us about the news, but he is like adding his opinion and what he thinks ought to happen as well. And so both of these people would be what we consider to be opinion leaders. People go to them for news and information, but also to like get cues about how they should feel about particular issues. All right, that's the first little bit, our just introduction to the idea of public opinion. Now we're going to take a little time and go through the public opinion process, and we'll probably be able to identify some points where there are potential problems.